Yeah, the other thing I was going to talk about a little bit is these upheavals are not confined solely to Marvel. The problems extend to Lucasfilm as well, and chiefly around the Acolyte, which is a show I'm sure we're all excited to see.
Can't wait.
But there's legal problems associated with that,
Oh
and
no.
I wasn't fully across this until just recently. But yeah, so apparently one of the producers, Karen McCarthy, she had accepted a deal to do the Acolyte. She had to then turn down other offers from Netflix, I think, which did her out of like $1 million at least. Like they were big deals. And then she was unceremoniously booted off the Acolyte, and so she's now suing Lucasfilm for lost earnings because she had to turn down all this other stuff. And so what this has done is shone a giant spotlight on what the status of the Acolyte is. Whether it's actually in production, whether it's a fully fledged show, or whether it's just going to be like a almost like a test bed to try and get like proper funding for it. Because you would have assumed rather than this go to like an expensive and very public and embarrassing legal battle, that they would have just paid her off behind the scenes, like rather than deal with all this. And the fact that they haven't been able to is kind of telling about what actual budget this show has got available to it and whether it's even a real thing. And I think Tom Midnight's Edge has just covered this like in the past couple of days. This is going to unearth a lot of potentially really embarrassing realities about what the Acolyte is and what Lucasfilm has actually got in the pipeline for these shows.
Yeah, actually, it was last week, I think it was. But yeah, still, it's
Sorry, yeah.
not that. Yeah, not that old anyway. Either way, but basically, this is one of those cases where it would probably just go away, and she wouldn't get jack squat because, as our friend Robert Meyer Burnett likes to point out, you don't get what you deserve in Hollywood. You get what you negotiate, right? And if she didn't have anything signed in paper, there's not much she can do. But what she does have in her favor is the email trail. If she has anything where they actually legitimately asked her to come out, because she is saying in her case that she was promised room and board, basically, moving expenses, and plus whatever her salary was going to be on top of it all. And she had moved, I guess, and turned down a huge offer from Apple, I think it was. And so her argument is that she would be basically working for the show, and then they just decided they didn't want to work with her anymore. And they're like, adios, see you later. And when she's like, well, what are you going to at least reimburse me for what I have done? And they gave her $5,000. And we went and we looked into it, and that was basically the amount that she had to have spent to get the place that she had moved into. Because she had said something about she had rented an apartment that was 250,000 or $2,500 for the month, so she probably had to have come up with a security deposit and the first month's rent. And that's probably the only amount that Disney could say that they would be like, yeah, okay, fine, we'll give you that as a pittance or pittance or whatever, you know. And in that, they probably guilted themselves. Like, that's the only reason why I feel like this might have some weight in court, is because as long as she didn't have any contracts, Disney can just sit there and say, we never signed shit. You know, like, there's nothing you can do. We had no deal. You know, you were working for whom? Not us. But since they gave her that $5,000, that is probably going to be something that her lawyers are going to really use as a sticking point, as that was basically like some kind of contract was at least agreed upon there. So she might have some grounds for this. But
Is
again,
the
like, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, is the bigger issue not what could potentially come out about like what Lucasfilm are actually producing in terms of TV shows? Because I think the question mark was around, well, what is the Acolyte even going to be? Like, do you even have funding to make this into a proper show, or are you still trying to pitch it to Disney to get the actual the investment that you need? Because like that's what they do with these shows quite often, isn't it? Like, rather than make a pilot or make a whole season, they'll almost produce like a sizzle reel of like potential footage. This is what the show could look like. We've been given like $1 million to produce this, and if you guys like it, we can then we can negotiate like fully funding to move forward into production. And it based on all this, it kind of seems like that's where they were at. It's not a show in the normal sense. It's still trying to get like even commissioned.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, like, I'm sure they don't want any kind of discovery getting out as far as just publicly for anything when it comes to behind the scenes with Lucasfilm. As far as like the amount of money for the show, that's the thing. We've heard that Kathleen Kennedy can greenlight TV shows until she's blue in the face. What she can't do is greenlight a movie without getting it past the upper management. But at the same time, you're right. It sounds like they have a funding issue, but from as best as we can tell, the show's already deep into shooting. So on that respect, the show's already
So it is happening.
in the process, yeah, of. But yeah, and you know, it's one of those things where I don't know what kind of money she was offered for her to turn down the offer she got at Apple. But yeah, that's where I can't understand how big of a show this could really be. I've seen a couple behind the scenes photos, but nothing makes me feel like it's, you know, anything's huge. Or it could just be, like you said, a sizzle reel they're putting together right now, or just a pilot episode. We don't even know. They might say, oh, they shot a pilot, but we decided not to pick it up. That could happen
Well,
too, but I don't know.
I mean, just thinking about like the shows that they've made so far, you know, the Book of Boba Fett disaster, like garbage. Obi-Wan Kenobi, garbage. Like people were laughing at it by the end. The Mandalorian, first season was all right, I guess. It kind of got the ball rolling. Season 2, fair enough. Season 3's fallen off a cliff. Like people have lost interest in that. So if you can't even get interest from a show with Obi-Wan Kenobi in it, if you can't get interest from The Mandalorian anymore, like your flagship show, what chance have you got with something like The Acolyte? Like that is just going to be like, it's going to be like the Batwoman of Star Wars shows. Nobody's going to give a shit about it.
It feels very similar to the state of Marvel shows. It's like if you're having trouble grabbing people for your main stars, what hope does fucking Harkness have? You know?
I mean, at least Marvel's got the movies. Like as much as they've been kind of underperforming, they at least generate some kind of press, some kind of interest. Star Wars doesn't even have that. They've got no movies in the pipeline. All they have is their TV shows, and no one cares about them anymore either. Like they've faded into irrelevancy at this point.
But what is the story of the Acolyte that must be told that will engage me enough
Women,
to subscribe to Disney Plus because I have to see it?
LGBTQ plus.
Yeah, it's made by an intersectional feminist, and so it's intersectional feminism because like they have literally got zero imagination, and they can only write about what they do.
Jedi. Yeah, it will be a girl inventing the Jedi. Yeah,
It's just I'll tell you this, that leaning into that is not a profitable pathway. And look,
Nope.
I come from indie film. I see a lot of indie film. I see a lot of movies. We have a category for it when they come into Film Threat. We call it a bunch of. This is a documentary about a bunch of lesbian wheat farmers. That is, like, but those movies never make money. Movies with those themes, and when you see that, like Willow was recently canceled, I'm shocked that they would move forward with something that's not a sure thing. You know, it would be a sure thing. You could make a show. Hear me out. I'm going crazy right now.
Oh my god.
Let's do a show. Let's do a show called The Adventures of Luke Skywalker from the Journal of the Wills, where we'll find out exactly what the fuck the wills are, because we've never found out officially.
Well, George had that in his treatment for like the sequel trilogy. The wills were going to be a big part of that.
Look,
never got to see
Star
it.
Wars is the story of Luke Skywalker. When you talk about what story is character. All of these little offshoot things, the Boba Fett show, okay, Boba Fett was mildly interesting as a side character. The most interesting aspect of Boba Fett was the fact that we didn't know anything about him. And as soon as we learned everything about him, he became vastly uninteresting. So all these sort of offshoot shows are just hot garbage from the get-go because they're not connected to the thing that is the soul of Star Wars.
I think the offshoot shows could have worked if the movies were strong. If
and they
the
did put Luke in those
somehow,
shows.
True.
Remember, Luke.
Yeah,
if
the sequel movies had been awesome and they carried on the legacy of Star Wars, I think you could have done all kinds of offshoots from that because the core of the universe would be strong and you can build on that.
Done
But
this crazy thing called adapt the EU. The book that were out there that they shit canned almost immediately. That was the only chance they had because George didn't write lore. He didn't have all this. You know why Tolkien is the fucking GOAT? Is because he made this fabric, this whole universe, this whole world, this whole secondary world. Wow. And before he made Lord of the Rings, before The Hobbit was even incorporated into it, like he had this vast texture out there that you can like, that gave it depth. George Lucas had a great idea that needed to be filled in. And as little kids, we filled in the imagination. We got a little bantha tracks when we were members of the fan clubs, and we got little snippets of, oh man, could Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader fought over lava? And like, that's all we knew at the time. So we filled it in. Now, George, to his credit, gave it to other authors later on to fill in much later. And they did a very good job. And Kathleen Kennedy shit canned it. That was the only chance they ever had.
But no, according to Kathleen Kennedy, there's no
There's
books and there's no expanded universe.
Don't exist.
And
None.
How has she still got a fucking job? Like, it's baffling.
No, I know. And don't underestimate the power of the patheticness. Like the idea of like focusing more so on Luke, like Skinwalker Luke, what they've got in that turned up in Boba Fett. If he turns up again in Mando, which I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
It's still the best name. Skinwalker Luke is
it's what they do with any of the characters when they come back. You know, because technically speaking, this goes as far back as what, Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One.
Yeah,
but it's like that advice to, like, you know, focus on the characters people like. It's like, yeah, we got to be careful because, you know, sometimes they'll do stuff that you're like, holy fuck, never ever do a character we like ever again. Ruin your own characters, and that's I guess what Mando's is right now.